secret wives that did not officially exist, brothels that followed the army across the entire empire, thousands of young men far from home with a pocket full of pay and a lot of time to kill. This is what Roman soldiers really did for fun when they were off duty, and the army knew it could not stop most of it. Because here is the truth: the most feared war machine in the ancient world was made of ordinary men who, the second they put down the sword, wanted exactly what young men have always wanted: wine, women, gambling, a good fight for sport, a hot bath, and something to spend their money on that they would regret the next morning. Today you will find out what really went on around a Roman fort when the fighting stopped. And I will warn you now, it was far closer and a lot messier than the marble statues ever let on. Let us start with the money, the wine, and the trouble it bought. Start with gambling, because it was an obsession. Roman soldiers bet on everything. They had dice made of bone, ivory, and bronze. They played a game with the knuckle bones of animals, tossing them like dice. They bet their pay, their food, their clothes, sometimes things they did not even own yet. Excavations of Roman forts all across Europe turn up dice everywhere, and some of them are loaded, weighted on one side to always land the same way. Soldiers cheated their own brothers in arms. Gambling was technically banned outside of certain festivals because it caused fights, debts, and trouble. But nobody cared. A soldier spent weeks marching, standing guard, and dying of boredom. And when he finally got some free time, he wanted action. Dice were the fastest way to feel something. Carved directly into the stone of barracks, archaeologists have found game boards worn smooth by thousands of games. The soldier's boredom built its own casino. In some forts, they have even found small counters and pieces from strategy board games, something like checkers or primitive chess, that soldiers played for hours, mind against mind, when the cold kept them indoors. It was not all brute force. The legionary played with his head, too. There is a detail about the dice that says it all. In the forts, they have found dice with numbers repeated or deliberately misplaced, and even an ancient die inscribed with a message mocking whoever loses. Soldiers did not just gamble, they trash-talked each other. Beating a comrade at dice meant weeks of bragging. Losing meant putting up with the jokes of the entire barracks. It was a parallel economy of money, pride, and humiliation running inside the most serious army in the world. And gambling debts were a real problem. A soldier who lost too much could find himself broke before payday, in debt to a comrade or to a moneylender in the tavern. This caused fights, grudges, and sometimes violence within the unit itself. That is why commanders tried to control it. But controlling gambling in an army of bored men with money in their pockets was like trying to stop the rain with your bare hands. It simply could not be done. Some soldiers even kept written tallies of their winnings and losses, tracking who owed whom, like a crude ledger of barracks debts that everyone took very seriously. And speaking of boredom, that is the key almost nobody explains. Military life was not one endless battle. Most of the time, a legionary was not fighting. He marched, he dug, he built, he stood guard, and he waited. A soldier could spend years at a frontier fort without seeing a single real battle. The number one enemy of the Roman army was not a barbarian with an axe. It was boredom. And all of their fun was born out of a desperate need to kill that boredom. Move on to drinking, because Romans and wine were inseparable. A soldier received wine as part of his official ration, usually in the form of pasca, a sour, vinegary wine watered down. It was not meant to get you drunk. It was there to hydrate you safely, because drinking plain water could make you sick. But on top of the ration wine, there was real wine, the good stuff, to spend your free time on. And that is where the party started. Around every Roman fort, a town grew up. It was called the canabae, and that town existed by and for the soldiers. It was full of taverns where a legionary blew his pay on wine, food stalls, merchants, craftsmen, and people ready to sell soldiers exactly what soldiers wanted to buy. When his shift ended, the legionary walked out of the fort and into the nearest tavern to drink with his comrades until he could drink no more. Let us stay on those towns, the canabae, because they were entire worlds of entertainment. These were not a few shacks. Over time, some of these settlements grew so large they became real cities. And several major European cities today were born exactly like this, as the bar and the brothel next to a Roman barracks. Think about that. Whole cities that exist today started as the place where legionaries went to blow their pay. The fun of the soldiers, quite literally, founded cities. In those canabae there was everything. Street vendors, fortune tellers who read your future for a coin, healers, craftsmen who engraved your name on a ring, women, musicians, con men, and card sharks. It was an entire ecosystem built for one thing: separating a soldier from his money in exchange for a good time. And it was very, very good at its job. And it worked. A legionary could walk into the canabae with a month's pay and stagger out at dawn without a single coin, hungover, with a story to tell, and, if he was lucky, without having started a fight he would regret. And these taverns did not just serve wine, they served company. And everybody knew exactly what that meant. Prostitution was everywhere around military camps, and it was one of the biggest businesses of all. Think about the math. You had thousands of fit young men, paid in coin, stuck for years on a frontier with no wives and nothing to do at night. Where the legions marched, the brothels followed, right up to the gates. A Roman fort had walls, watchtowers, and, a short stagger away, a row of establishments built for one purpose. The generals knew it. They tolerated it. Privately, most of them figured that a soldier who could blow off steam this way was a soldier who would not desert or mutiny. So they looked the other way and let the coins change hands. And here is the twist almost nobody knows. For a long time, Roman soldiers were flat out forbidden to marry while serving. The idea was that a wife and kids made a man soft and distracted. But telling thousands of young men they cannot marry does not stop them falling into bed with someone. It just means the relationship has no paperwork. So soldiers quietly took local women as unofficial wives, fathered unofficial children, and built entire secret families in the towns beside the fort. Families that on paper simply did not exist. Everyone knew. The officers knew. It was an open secret hiding in plain sight. And when the soldier finally retired after 25 brutal years, one of the first things he often did was legally recognize the wife and children he had been raising in the shadows for decades. Now the baths, because this will surprise you. Almost every Roman fort, even on the most remote and freezing frontiers, had public baths. In the middle of nowhere, surrounded by enemies, in the cold of northern Britain, the Romans built complexes with hot water, cold water, steam rooms, and heated floors. For a soldier, the baths were the center of social life. You went there not just to wash, but to relax, to talk, to do business, and to hang out. At the baths, everything happened. Soldiers coated themselves in oil and scraped it off with a curved tool, the strigil, to remove the dirt and sweat. They soaked in the hot water after an exhausting march. They played, they ate, they gossiped. A Roman fort without baths was unthinkable, because the army knew that a clean, relaxed, entertained soldier was a soldier who did not mutiny. The baths were not a luxury, they were a tool to keep morale up. And sport, because these men were athletes. In their free time, soldiers exercised, wrestled, boxed, and competed against each other. Wrestling and boxing were common pastimes. They ran, lifted weights, and trained with weapons even when they did not have to. For a legionary, the line between training and having fun was very thin. Wrestling a comrade in the mud was both exercise and entertainment. Competition was in their blood, and they turned anything into a challenge. They also hunted. Hunting was one of the favorite pastimes of soldiers stationed in areas with forests and animals. Chasing boars, deer, hares, not just for sport, but because it meant fresh meat to break up the army's monotonous diet. A boar hunted down by a group of soldiers was a feast and a story to tell for weeks. Hunting mixed adrenaline, food, and bragging, the three things a soldier loved most. A hunting trophy like a boar tusk was worn almost like a medal, proof that you were more than just another body in the line. Now one of the most human parts, letters. Roman soldiers wrote constantly to their families and friends, and we know exactly what they said because some of those letters have survived. At a fort in northern Britain called Vindolanda, hundreds of thin wooden tablets were found with written messages, and they do not talk about war or glory. They talk about real life. One soldier desperately asks to be sent socks and underwear because he was freezing on the frontier. Another writes about beer. There is an invitation to a birthday party written by an officer's wife, one of the oldest known documents written by a woman in Latin. There are shopping lists, complaints, greetings, gossip. Reading them is like looking straight into a soldier's life and realizing he worried about exactly the same things you do. The cold, the food, his friends, whether the packages from home would arrive. And there is a detail about pay that changes everything. A Roman soldier did not get his full wage handed to him. The army automatically deducted the cost of food, clothing, equipment, and even a portion they forced him to keep as savings. What was left over to actually spend was relatively little. And that money, the little that was truly his, burned a hole in his pocket. He spent it on wine, on dice, on company, and on small luxuries, precisely because it was the only part of his life he had total control over. Everything else, the army decided. His free time and his free money were the only territory that belonged to him. That is why the fun mattered so much. It was not just about having a good time. It was the only moment of the day when a legionary stopped being a cog in a machine and became a person again, with his own tastes, whims, and choices. A soldier with no fun was a soldier about to break. Smart commanders understood this perfectly, and that is why, even though they banned gambling on paper, they looked the other way almost every time. And of course, there were the big celebrations. The Roman army stopped for religious festivals, and there were many. The wildest was Saturnalia in December, a festival of several days where everything was turned upside down. People ate, drank without limit, exchanged gifts, gambled freely, and for a few days, discipline itself was relaxed. Even the normal order was flipped as a joke. It was the moment of the year every soldier waited for, the release valve for all the built-up pressure. They also celebrated the emperor's birthday, victories, and the anniversaries of the legion itself. Each legion had its sacred dates, its gods, its standards, and it celebrated them with feasts and ceremonies. These festivals were not just fun, they bound the group together. A soldier who eats, drinks, and celebrates alongside his comrades forms a bond that later makes him fight for them on the battlefield. Fun for the Roman army was a military strategy disguised as a party. There was another form of fun that seems incredible today: graffiti. Roman soldiers wrote and drew on walls everywhere, exactly like a bored teenager today. They scratched their names into the stones of the fort to prove they had been there. They wrote insults about other soldiers. They drew caricatures of their officers. They noted down romantic conquests, complaints, jokes, and bragged about their wins at dice. The walls of Roman forts and cities were a social network made of stone, full of messages from men who wanted to be remembered, even if only for a scribble. Many of those graffiti are still there, 2,000 years later, and some are so crude they could have been written yesterday. Then there were the superstitions and lucky charms, which were part of their mental entertainment too. Soldiers were extremely superstitious. They carried lucky amulets, small pendants, and figures of gods to protect themselves. Before an important bet or a battle, they touched their charm or muttered a prayer to their favorite god. Many followed the god Mithras, a secret cult very popular among the military, with ceremonies in underground temples that only the initiated could enter. Belonging to that secret club, with its ranks and its rites, was another form of entertainment and belonging. The soldier looked for excitement even in his religious life. Back to food, because eating well was one of the great pleasures. The soldier's basic diet was mostly grain, which they made into bread and a thick porridge. They ate a lot of cheese, olive oil, vegetables, and meat when they could get it. But in his free time and with his own money, a soldier bought luxuries at the stalls of the canabae. Good wine, sauces, fruit, oysters, and even spices imported from other parts of the empire. At Vindolanda, traces of surprisingly varied meals have been found. The Roman soldier, when he could afford it, ate a good deal better than we imagine. And then there were the animals. Many forts had dogs, and not just guard dogs. Soldiers grew attached to them. There were also games with animals, and some soldiers raised roosters for cockfights. Yet another way to gamble, because in the end, anything with two possible outcomes was an excuse to bet. 2 roosters, 2 wrestlers, 2 dice. The Roman soldier found a wager in everything that moved. Cockfights in particular drew crowds of soldiers who screamed, cheered, and threw coins into the ring, turning 2 angry birds into an entire afternoon of noise and betting. And there was music and storytelling. At night, around the fire, soldiers did what soldiers have done in every era: told stories, sang. Some played instruments. They told exaggerated battle tales, dirty jokes, legends and rumors about the officers. The songs of Roman soldiers were often rude and mocking. Even in triumph parades, the troops sang songs that made fun of the very general they were honoring, to remind him he was still human. Crude humor was a way of mentally surviving a hard life. Some of these fireside songs were passed from legion to legion across the whole empire. So a marching tune, invented on one frontier, might end up being sung by soldiers thousands of miles away who had never met the men who wrote it. And the theater and the spectacles. In large cities with a military presence, there were amphitheaters, and soldiers loved gladiator fights and races. Some important forts had their own small amphitheater for shows and training. A soldier off duty in the right place could spend the day watching gladiators fight, exactly like a civilian. Bloody entertainment cut across every class. Everyone loved it, and the soldier was no exception. There is one more thing worth remembering about all this fun. It had a purpose the army fully understood. A soldier who could blow off steam, laugh, drink, and gamble was a soldier who stayed sane through years of harsh discipline and sudden violence. Take all of that away, and you get mutiny, desertion, and men who crack under pressure. The Roman army did not tolerate fun in spite of its discipline. It allowed fun because of its discipline, as the pressure valve that kept the whole terrifying machine from blowing apart. Every dice game and every night in the tavern was, in a strange way, holding the empire together. Let us recap the secret life of the legionary. When he was not marching, digging trenches, or dying for Rome, a Roman soldier gambled with loaded dice, got drunk in taverns beside the fort, relaxed in heated baths in the middle of nowhere, wrestled and boxed with his comrades, hunted boars, scratched rude graffiti into the walls, wrote home begging for socks, threw wild parties at Saturnalia, ate oysters and drank good wine when he had the money, and at night sang crude songs around the fire. The most disciplined and lethal army in ancient history was made up of men who, deep down, wanted the same thing almost anyone wants: a good drink, a good bet, a hot meal, a bit of action, and good friends to laugh with. They conquered the known world, but when they put down the sword, they were shockingly similar to you. So the next time you picture Roman legionnaires as soulless war machines, Remember the soldier on the cold frontier of Britain who stopped cleaning his sword for a moment to write to his family and beg them, please, to send him a new pair of socks.